So, Peggy, we'll start with you. Why don't you introduce yourself, say where you're joining from, and introduce your father.
My name is Peggy Green Bryant, and I am currently living in Midwest City, Oklahoma. I am the second of five children. I have an older sister and three younger brothers. We grew up in Lawton, Oklahoma. Dad was stationed at Fort Sill, and that's just where they made our home. And I am married to Vern Bryant. We have two daughters, Lauren and Jordan. Lauren is now married to Breck, so we have two grandkids. I am a retired English teacher and taught for 35 years. My dad and mom both grew up in Coulterville, Illinois, and that was their home, but he enlisted right after high school, and he's a year older than my mom. So they got married after she graduated from high school. And so they went to California. My sister was born, and then he got out. He enlisted, but he got out for a year, and then he re-enlisted, and then went to Wisconsin, and then settled in Lawton. So the year he went to Vietnam was the year we moved back to Illinois, which I think was God's way of looking out for us, because mom was close to family that tour. And so when you look at things, it says Illinois is they get to claim him as their fallen soldier, but he's buried in Oklahoma, and Oklahoma's our home. So.
All right. Thank you. Maryann?
I'm Maryann Mazza. My brother was Francis Alavento. He was a warrant officer. He was drafted and was in the Army a very short time before he was killed. I'm married and I have two sons.
And where are you joining from?
I live in Staten Island, New York. I was raised in Brooklyn, New York, and that's where my brother Frank lived and was married there.
Okay. And would you prefer for me to call him Frank or Francis?
Well, we all called him Frank.
Okay. Okay. Great. Well, let's talk about the circumstances of the two of you meeting each other. You guys want to walk me through the events that led to your connecting?
I think that's me. When I was in high school, I asked my mom, I said, who did my dad die with? You know, it's something that I was always curious about. And I think I always have this feeling people should not die alone. And so I was curious about him. And mom got really a little angry. And she said, I don't know why you'd want to know that. He killed your dad, you know. And it kind of shocked me because I never thought about it that way. So I didn't, I dropped it, mom's got her feelings, and we respected that. So flash forward to the 1980s. My next door neighbor was an Air Force pilot. And so I was talking to Dave, and I told him what my mom said. And he said, I can guarantee you there is no way that pilot wanted to die any more than your dad did. And I was like, okay, that made me feel better. So then flash forward to the World Wide Web, which was the 90s. And I found a website called thewallusa.com. And so I plugged in my dad's information, and, people commented, and it was a really nice thing, a connecting thing. And I was sitting there and I'm like, I bet I can find out who he died with. So I plugged in all the information except the name. And sure enough, only one soldier died in Binh Dinh, Vietnam in 1969 on April 8. And it was Francis Alavento. Francis Alavento. So I then just put that in the back of my brain. And about a year later, probably, I was looking on the page again, and Maryann had commented. And I noticed she had said she was 11. And I'm like, I was 10 and 11. You know, I was 10 when when we got the notice that they were missing. The funerals were in August, and I had turned 11 in June. And so I was like, oh, so I saw a connection there. And then I guess that was in January, I read that. And then in Memorial Day, I was just sitting at my desk, and I'm like, I'm going to write her. And so I put in the regarding line, your brother. And I mean, she can probably comment. I mean, I can't imagine years later just reading, you know, your father. And I'm, you know, that would be a shock to me. But I did it anyway. And I wrote her a letter and said, I think my father was the passenger of your brother's helicopter. And just what memories do you have? And so that's how it started.
Mm. And Maryann, what do you remember about that initial contact?
I was elated when I heard from her. I was so happy because I had no idea. We were told that he was flying a priest to say mass, and that he was like some Indian priest, but we had no idea, and nobody ever told us anything. And that he first we were told he was shot down, and that's why we didn't have original dog tags. And then someone had come to my parents' house that lived around the corner and said, I'm so sorry I never came before, but your brother crashed into a mountain in heavy fog, and he was with a black man, that their family doesn't want to hear from you. So I was like, okay, what took you 20, 30 years to come and tell this? My parents were still alive, and my mother was heartbroken, and she was crying and crying, reliving the whole incident. And I was like, okay. So I just let this go. And my brother and sister had moved to Florida. So I had nobody except Rosalie, who was his wife for 9 months. She stayed with us. She remarried, and she was my sister, connected forever. And Rosalie said, stop worrying about that, all that stuff, because you'll never know who that person is. And I said, I can't let go of this. And then Peggy came and said, it's my dad. And I said, well, if it's your dad and he's a food service worker, I killed my brother. How could you be my friend? My brother killed your father. I had the same notion that she wouldn't be receptive to me because my brother had killed a father of 5 children. And she said, no, don't be like that. And we put together that we were exactly the same age, because my birthday is July and her birthday is June. I said, no, please write to me. I said, I don't type as well. She said it was the beginning of the computer. So now she's writing these beautiful, eloquent notes to me, and I'm writing like, and she said, keep writing to me. I want to know more about your life. And yeah. I told her my brother was drafted, and he was only 1 year in the service, and he was drafted straight to helicopter school. He drove a helicopter before he drove a car. And I was so happy to have a friend that I could talk to and relate to. I was compelled to meet her. From the minute we met, there was no Zoom or FaceTime or we had nothing. And she said, I'm coming to New York, and I'm bringing my daughters. And as soon as she came up the stairs off the subway, I drove to Brooklyn to meet her, which is a drive. As soon as she came up, I knew who she was. We were connected like sisters. It was meant to be. It was really meant to be. It was that my brother was sending this person to me.
Hmm. And when was that you met face to face for the first time?
Peg, do you remember? 2014, 15? I don't know.
Well, that's when we started writing. I think we went to New York a couple of years later.
Okay.
I think we visited, I think it was 2 years. So,
So around
yeah,
2016.
2016. Yeah,
Yeah.
around there.
Well,
So,
yeah, at
and
the
I,
risk of, I'm not, the one thing that I'm having a hard time understanding is why Peggy, your mother, and you, Maryann, and perhaps other people were under the impression that this was somehow Frank's fault.
I,
And
you know,
how long did you have to live with that notion before you finally were able to let that go?
I was a little girl, and back then it was my parents was grieving so terribly. I had no one to speak with. I had nobody. My brother and sister moved away.
we didn't talk about it in my family either. It was, I don't know if that's when the protests started in the United
It
States.
was
I mean,
terrible. It was
we
a terrible
never,
time.
yeah, we never talked about it. I don't know if mom just thought, people would have a bad impression of us if they knew that, it was he was in Vietnam. I mean, I don't know.
It's not like
It
today.
just seems like a strange assumption if a helicopter goes down and the
No.
people in the helicopter are killed in Vietnam during a war. Why would anybody assume that it was that pilot's fault?
I I think my mom was just wanting to blame somebody. She needed answers. I don't think the military gave answers readily. And I think she just, was looking to blame somebody. Dad, that was his second tour of Vietnam. And I was told that he had taken somebody else's place. So mom also blamed the guy who stayed back and who dad took his place. Mom blamed him too. So I think she was just looking, to blame somebody. I think. I
Maryann,
mean, I
what?
didn't blame Frank. I never did. I didn't understand that at all. And that's when Dave, my helicopter or my Air Force friend, had said, no, there's no way he wanted to die. It was like, okay.
Right.
I found comfort in that.
Yeah, yeah. It just seems like such a strange assumption for anyone to
Right.
make. Maryann, do you remember who put that notion in your head that it was somehow Frank's fault? That he
I think it was the times that you had um Jane Fonda out there, and you had so many things. And I didn't know, watching the news, and when we would watch the news when he was still alive, and you would see the negativity
Yeah.
on the news, I was like, is he doing the right thing? I mean, he was drafted, and then my second brother got a draft card, and my parents got that deferred. And I didn't know what my patriotism lied. Was it, I was only 11 years old. Nobody spoke to me about anything. I had an aunt and uncle, Nancy and Joe, that were very close to me, but all they tried to do, and Aunt Dolly, I mean, aunts and uncles tried to comfort me as a child, but I needed answers. I mean, what was going on? Why were we there? What were we doing? I was famous in a neighborhood. I was famous at school. I was famous at reunions. I was famous at, parties when we did start going back to family gatherings for a reason I didn't understand. What was going on? I was only 11, 12. I didn't really understand it.
Yeah. It just seems, and I'm sorry to keep, I'm not trying to, overemphasize this, but it seems like in the absence of any other information other than he was flying a helicopter and it crashed and he died, the fact that we're at war, it seems to me like the natural assumption would have been the enemy did it, not Frank did it.
Right.
I
So
think
it's
because
just,
it was an accident. You know, they did say it was later. We learned because we were told too they were shot down. And then because I've got relatives who say, no, they was shot down. No, they crashed into a mountain. And then anything you find on the internet says that it was bad weather and that they crashed.
I see. So how many years passed between the initial notification, which I'm assuming was just a few days after the accident, and the second notification saying that it was an accident? Like how long
A
was the
long
period?
time. A long time, right? A long time.
I don't
I see.
know.
A
Yeah.
long time.
Okay. Okay. All right. So you said, Peggy, you said that the accident occurred in April. Was it April 6th?
April 8,
April 8th,
1969.
69.
Yes.
April 8th of 69. Okay. Yeah, that was I mean, by then the war was highly controversial in the States.
And if you look at that wall, there are so many names on 68 and 69. And when I go to the wall of faces and, you know, and just click on those soldiers, I mean, it's like 19, 18, you know, even I think that's what struck me the most when I first read about Frank. It was his age. He was 22 years old. You know, that's just so young. You know, we lost so many young men. So my dad was a career Army, and I think it was his 15th year. And I don't know when he got involved in the mess hall. We recently found some photographs of him in Greece, you know, at a dining hall. And so he's always been a mess sergeant. He became a warrant officer and was in charge of many mess halls in the Lawton Fort Sill area. And so he had started an initiative in Vietnam where they made sure that the men under his control had a hot meal every day, and they were not eating the canned rations. And so that was what he set up his first tour of Vietnam, and then went back to finish that work or to continue that work. And you know, and you think, oh, a mess sergeant, you know, what could possibly, I mean, they're not in the middle of the combat, even though they were in combat zones. They were taking jeeps. He was out inspecting mess halls and they were taking the jeep, but apparently that pass became so dangerous, they had to start flying. And that's why, you know, they were in a helicopter. Frank, you know, that was his job, I guess, to take the priest and the food service technician to, you know, around because it was safer to fly, is what my cousin told me. It was safer to fly than it was to drive. So.
And do you know about where in Vietnam the crash occurred and where your father was on his way to?
Not that I know how to pronounce it. I think it's the Ming Yang Pass is where, are you familiar with that?
No.
Binh
No,
Dinh, Providence. Maryann, there's something else there.
that's okay. I can look it up.
Okay.
It'll be on the wall of faces. I'll
Yes,
go look it up.
it is. It
Yeah.
is.
Okay. Maryann, you said you were 11, right? When your brother was killed.
Yes.
What do you remember about him before he left?
My brother was the best big brother ever. He was the only person that was able to comb my hair. He took me to the movies. He bought me pizza. He was just great. Even when he had his girlfriend, which was Rosalie, they took me all over. He brought me home presents every time he went to basic training, wherever he was, Fort Sumter. He wrote me letters every day from Vietnam. It was great.
It's a big age difference. He was 11 years older than you.
I was a mistake. I wasn't supposed to be. So I
No,
have
no.
my brother Frank was 11 years older than me. My sister is 9, and my other brother is 5.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm the baby, much
Yeah.
younger.
Well, don't think of it as a mistake. Think of it as you were planned but not scheduled.
Oh no, they told me many, many times they were they were in their 40s, they were done having children. And my sister, my brother, they had a lot to do with raising me because my parents were in their 40s. At
Hmm.
that time, they were like,
Yeah.
so
So how did Frank do you have military people in your family? Or you said he was drafted.
he was drafted. My father was in the CBs. My uncle was in the army. My other uncle was in the army. My uncle was a medic in the army in Korea. The other guys were in World War II. We're big patriotic family. We always were.
So when he got his draft notice, there was no question.
No, not really. No, he was studying to be oh God, my son is
An engineer.
an engineer. He was studying. He was in second year of engineering school, college.
Where was he in going to school?
He was going in Long Island University.
So he could have gotten a deferment, I would think.
Nope, nope. They were taking everyone. They took every boy that age on my block, and they all came home.
Oh.
And my mother watched every boy come home except us.
Hmm. Do you know if he
And
ended up in hell?
and mothers that were having big parties and stuff asked my mother, "Do you mind if I have a party because your boy didn't come home?"
And what did she say?
Said, "Of course, have a party."
Do you know how he ended up in helicopters? Was that a choice? Was he interested in that, or did you just get sort of slotted that way?
Oh yeah, he was interested. Yes, I'm sure I'm positive.
Yeah.
Right at training as soon as he went to base camp.
Mm. Hmm. And so, what year did he enter the military?
1968.
Oh. So, if he entered in 1968, I mean,
Yeah.
you got 6 weeks of basic training and then some number of weeks of what they call advanced infantry training. And then you go to flight school. I mean, he
Mhm.
must have just gotten to Vietnam by
Right, six
April.
months. 6 months he was there.
He was in, okay. Yeah. Did you hear from him during those 6 months?
Every day he wrote me a letter. I have all of them. He wrote my mom, my sister, myself. He wrote to my parents because my father was a cement worker that he built the airstrip that he flew off of. They were
What
so
else do you,
happy that they had a cement guy there.
he was a cement guy?
Yeah, my father taught all of us how to lay cement because he was a cement worker.
Mm. So that wasn't his job, but he had that skill, so he did it.
Yeah.
Do you know where exactly he was based out of? Which base in Vietnam?
No, I don't. His wife does, but I
Okay.
don't. She
Rosalie.
remembers everything. Rosalie remembers everything from that. That was the love of her life.
What do you remember about the letters he wrote to you specifically? Anything come to
They
mind?
were Everything was to do well in school. Do well in school, do your studying. He knew what grade I was in, what I was studying. Do your work, study hard, and get a good job. Do well in school.
Did you?
Absolutely, 2 degrees. Yep.
Hmm. All
And
right.
I did the same thing for my boys. My youngest son looks exactly like my brother.
Hmm.
I see my brother every day.
And his nephew. Well, Peggy, let's talk a little bit about your father. You said he was career Army. He was in 15 years by the time that was it by the time that he left or by the time of the accident?
Um, he left that September, I think. And the accident was in April. So I don't know. You know, it had just said 15 years.
But he'd been
So
around for a while, and you said it was his second tour.
yes. Yeah.
What do
So
you
we don't
remember?
have, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna ask, what do you remember about what memories do you have about your dad that are still really vivid in your mind?
Not many. You know, he had spent a lot of time, like a year in Greece. He had spent a year in Germany. You know, he was getting, according to mom, he was getting all of his tours out of the way so that he could be around when we were older. And I remember he would come home, and Dennis, the brother younger than I, we would run, and we'd have a race to see who could take off those military boots, you know, the fastest, you know, just, but we don't have a lot of memories, I don't think, because we didn't talk about him, you know. We just, we didn't, and of course your memories fade. So there just aren't a lot of memories there. You know, I remember when he went missing. You know, we are a very Christian family, Methodist, and so we said our prayers every night. And I remember we would walk home from for lunch, and I would be by myself because my grade ate at a different time, and so I remember stepping up the prayers, you know, and it was, but there was something in my gut saying he wasn't coming home. You know, there was something saying, you're wasting your wishes, sister. It's not going to happen. And then I remember thinking, no, stop thinking that. And so anyway, when he went missing, Maryann was a celebrity while I was embarrassed. You know, you go back to school and I just had the feeling everybody knew and they were all looking at me, and I just didn't want that attention, didn't like that attention. And then when we got the notice that the bodies were recovered, we were out of school. It was August at that point. So, you know, sitting in a classroom, April, May, it was tough. So
Yeah. Yeah. So you were an MIA family for a few months.
yes. Yeah.
And I'm assuming, Maryann, the same was true for your family.
Yes, I was a celebrity, but not in a good way. I didn't like the attention either. Everybody was staring at me too. You know, it just meant that everybody knew who I was suddenly when I was very quiet as a child. So suddenly everybody knows you and is staring at you. I was a celebrity,
Yeah.
not in a good way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, but there
Colderville
was a
was a
period,
very,
there was a period from April to August, it sounds like, where
yeah,
it was unclear that he was officially listed as missing at that point.
right. Um, Colderville is a very small town, you know, about 1,200 people at the time, I think. And so everybody knew everybody and everybody was related to everybody. And so it was, you know, everybody knew. Everybody knew. When that car drove down our little street that had only 5 houses on it, you know, it didn't take long for word to get out that he was missing. So
Well, can we talk a little bit about the accident? Just kind of walk me through what you know, not what you knew at the time, but what you know now about that day. It sounds like Ivan and Frank were not the only two people on the helicopter. Uh,
no, they were
they
the only
were.
two. Yes.
That's, I mean, it just seems, I don't know that I've ever heard of a helicopter being flown by just one man. Isn't there usually a co-pilot?
True. That's what my brother asked. Yes. Yeah.
So what do we know about the circumstances of that day? Where were they headed? And Why was there no co-pilot? And uh, I mean, do we have any sense of how that day unfolded?
You
I
know,
don't know.
just reading comments on the wall of faces, you know, a soldier who commented on my dad's page had said that he remembered, you know, my dad was in such good spirits, and my dad was a very likable man. And so he was in good spirits, and that, you know, they got the news that the helicopter did not arrive where it was supposed to arrive. And then he left Vietnam, and so he never knew of my dad's you know, what happened until many years later. So I know, wasn't the helicopter brand new? You know, so sometimes I
brand new.
wonder, was it, you know, some kind of malfunction? I mean, these are all just guesses. We don't know.
No, I'm not sorry. I'm not prying
Yeah.
on the cause of the crash. I'm prying on I'm trying to get a picture of just the circumstances that led to it. It sounds like Frank was flying without a co-pilot, which seems unusual. He had only one passenger, which seems maybe a little unusual. I don't know. You had mentioned something about a chaplain before. Was there supposed to be a chaplain on the flight, and he ended up not going? Or
I understood that every Sunday he flew a chaplain to different locations, so all the men could have Catholic mass.
hmm. Hmm.
And I
And
understood that he was, my dad was inspecting the mess halls that they had set up, and that's what they were doing. Flying was safer than driving.
I'm just looking to see what day of the week that would have been. That would have been a Tuesday. So that's why April 8th, 1969 was a Tuesday.
Tuesday.
So that explains why the chaplain wasn't on board. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Somebody had mentioned a chaplain, and I thought there must have been somebody else on that aircraft.
No, Maryann was very surprised when I first told her that
yeah,
he was a food service technician.
Funny part, when I called my husband to make them dinner, we were arriving, and I always thought he was killed with a black man. And when Peggy showed up with her daughters,
surprise,
my husband said, Peggy, I thought you were black. Right?
Surprise.
We always thought that.
Because somebody told you that.
Somebody told us that. This person that came to us like at the I don't know, some anniversary of Vietnam, but he had all the wrong information. He came in, he upset my parents so much, and he had all the wrong information.
He probably meant well, but you know,
I think he had some PTSD.
I see.
Maybe something wrong with him. I don't know.
Mm. So let's see. I had one other question before we move on. Peggy, you talked a little bit about the car coming down the street and informing your family.
Yeah.
Maryann, do you remember anything about the day that your family got the news?
I was at the beach that day, that the first time that they came, and I had just come in the house and I was taking off my clothes. My grandmother always sat at the window watching the children play outside, and she let out a scream because obviously she knew what it was. And my mother and father went down to the door, and my mother just collapsed. My father, took the news. My grandmother was screaming, and we all knew exactly what it was. So, aunts and uncles, we're a big Italian family, and within 10 minutes we had a dining room full of aunts and uncles. there to comfort us. But there was no comforting at that point. It's a big Italian family, and they're all there to be with you. And everybody's trying to find out news. And those two soldiers did stay a while. They didn't leave right away. They came upstairs into our home. So I do remember that. Actually, my sister my sister, who never talks about it, we had said that, she has a different recollection. She says she was home making a watermelon dish or something, and she remembers that people were already at my house. So I guess it's just, I remember walking into it. I was at the beach. So I don't know. It's just, it's a long ago memory.
Yeah. Do you remember anything about the day that your parents got the second visit?
I remember Rosalie. I remember Rosalie sitting in a chair, and she didn't move. She didn't move. She knew it. Rosalie was with us from those 3 months. Rosalie only lived up the block from us. They were childhood sweethearts. So between her parents and our parents, she was like, she didn't move, she didn't eat. The priest came to sit with her, and she just stood there and didn't move for 3 months. It was waiting. That's what I remember. I remember everything about Rosalie. She had a dog at the time. We were never allowed to have dogs. So I was able to have this dog. And then as soon as they found out that Frank had passed, they told me that they sent the dog to a farm because it was my brother and Rosalie's dog. So
How long had they been married?
they were married 9 months.
How old was she when he passed away?
She was 2 years older than him. So if he was 22, she was 24.
Mm. Peggy, do you remember anything about the second visit?
I remember, okay, the first visit, I was sitting on the front porch by myself, and I saw the car coming down the road. Like I said, there were only 5 houses on our street, and they stopped in front of our house. So I remember sneaking around, or not sneaking, walking around to the back door and going in, and I was really good at eavesdropping. And I remember listening because my mom was packed. She was meeting my dad in Hawaii when he was going to have TDY. When we were helping her clean out her house, we found a letter that he had written to her, giving her all these instructions on where she's to go in the airport. And so she was packed and ready to go to Hawaii to meet him. And then they gave her the news. And I don't remember her telling us 5 about what happened, about that he was missing. I don't remember that. But in August, when the car comes back, I remember that. We were sitting there watching TV in a little TV room between the kitchen and the living room. And so Mom was in the living room by herself. And I remember when she came in and she said, "Your dad's not coming home."
So the men came to the door, gave her the news. You guys continued watching television. You weren't aware of the conversation in the next room until she came and told you. Oh, you had an idea.
Yeah, we I mean, we were old enough. My sister and I were old enough to have an idea of what's going on. Chris and Scott were younger. My brother Dennis remembers being at my aunt's house when he got the news. So, but I was at home. So, yeah, she came in.
Peggy, let me ask you, you mentioned that you said we never talked about it.
Mm-mm.
You said that several times. And I can understand why it would be difficult for your mother to talk about it, but I have 3 kids, and
Right.
they talk to each other. You know what I mean? They talk to each other. Did you and your siblings talk about it when mom
No.
wasn't around?
No, we did not. We did not. On his birthday was April 26th. And she was really upset one day and said, "You guys don't even know that today's your dad's birthday." And, and I didn't say anything, but my brain was thinking, how would we even know that if we never celebrated it? We never even talked about it. So it was, yeah, I don't remember talking about it at all.
Your siblings would have been going through this essentially the same thing that you were going through, right? I mean,
That's true, but no, my sister is a very quiet person. I'm the one who got in trouble for talking back and saying my piece of mind. Susan never did, never. Scott and Chris were 5 and 6 years old, so they no, we wouldn't have talked to them. No, it's not until probably in the last 10 years, I would say, that we have talked about that. So,
which incidentally is the same amount of time that you've known Maryann.
that's exactly right.
Is there a connection there?
And I did tell them about her. Yeah, when Maryann came to Oklahoma, I took her to Lawton, and Lawton's about 100 miles from here. And she met my sister and my cousin, and yeah. So.
Well, Maryann, do you remember having conversations with your siblings about your other siblings about Frank?
Not too many, no. Like I said, they live in Florida.
Yeah, they were much older. But it sounds like he was the oldest.
He was the oldest.
Yeah.
But I do have a family here. I have cousins that I see on holidays, and they do speak of my brother. So I did have those years, and they're all older than me, so they remember a lot of things about him. I have a cousin, Blaze, that was friends with him, and did tell me a lot of stories about my brother Frank.
Do you remember any stories?
Actually, not really, but they were in Vietnam together, and Blaze and him worked in the supermarket together, and they were, about the same age friends.
Yeah. So Frank was the eldest, and he was killed at 22. The next two, who were, you said, 9 years older than you and 5 years older than you, they were probably still at home.
They were. But they moved shortly after that. 1971, 72, they moved to Florida.
Okay. All right. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and get back to the two of you meeting. You've kind of described to me, the day that you met. Can each of you just talk a little bit about how the relationship has evolved and what it's meant to you?
Oh, she's my best friend I call her my Peg. I love her. I have never been so happy meeting a pen pal. And then I was compelled to go and see her. I said to my husband, after she came here for a day, and I drove her to over a bridge and to the pizza place where John Travolta was. She wanted to go there. I drove her to some places. I said to my husband, I have to go to Oklahoma. I have to see my Peg. So I went out there for a week, and she treated me like we were best friends, sisters I never met before. She took me all over the place, and I just love her. I'm so happy I have her in my life.
And the strange thing is,
so you visited. So first, Peggy, you went to New York, and then later,
yes.
Maryann, you went to Oklahoma.
Yeah, I had to go. I was compelled to go. I couldn't wait to see her again.
So
And
how
I was,
long was it between the New York meeting and the Oklahoma meeting?
Maybe the following year.
yeah,
Okay, so pretty quick.
yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen each other other than those two get-togethers?
Yeah, then we went to the wall together. It was the 50th anniversary of the death. So we planned to meet there. And I took my sister, she took her sister. And then other people got in on the trip, and we had a wonderful trip. We did some sightseeing. We had a meeting at the wall, and just commiserated our pain together. It was a beautiful, beautiful, what, 5 days?
Yeah.
Now, was that your first time at the wall for either of you?
No,
No,
it was my third.
So you, Maryann, you had also been there before.
yeah, once before. On I do some work with the veterans of New York, the Vietnam veterans of New York.
Uh-huh.
My cousin Joe's brother ran it for years, so I walk up. I told you Fifth Avenue on Veterans Day. I walk a mile in your boots. They do that. I read the names on March 28th, which is
Vietnam Veterans Day.
Vietnam Veterans Day. So I did it once with them.
Mm. Peggy, do you want to talk about the
Yeah.
relationship and how it's evolved and what it's meant to you? And I'm particularly interested in the thing that I find so compelling about your story is how you've healed each other. Right? Neither of you had anyone to talk to about this
Right.
until you met each other. And I'm sure that you found all sorts of other things to talk about with each other, but the thing that connects you is this helicopter crash.
Yeah.
And so what I just can't imagine what that must be like to be, a full-grown adult, and for the first time to have someone you can talk to about the accident.
Right. Right. First, I want to address the fact that she calls me Peg, because nobody calls me Peg except family. My dad's family and mom's family in Illinois, they call me Peg. And when Maryann started calling me Peg, I'm like, oh, she's my family. I mean, it just seemed natural. My daughters and I went to New York, and it was too jam-packed. We were just go, 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 go. And I had planned to meet Maryann at Coney Island. That was it. We were meeting at Coney Island. And and stranger danger, I know all that, and we're very aware. And so I'm like, okay, I'm meeting this person that I don't really know, that we just connected through writing. And so, we saw each other, and I mean, knew it was her, like she said. I mean, I knew it was her. And my daughters went to put their feet in the ocean while Maryann and I sat and talked on the bench. And she said, you want to come to my house? And I didn't say anything because I'm like, oh, that's imposing. I mean, it was just too, so I didn't say anything. And then she said it again, I want you to come to my house. And so I looked at the girls and I was like, okay, let's go. And so we did. And after we met her, okay, who fixed the dinner? No, we saw the sights, because we saw where John Travolta walked down the street. And then we got a pizza, but when we got to her house, we didn't eat the pizza. They fixed some delicious Italian meal with this delicious bread, and her sons were there. Both of her boys were there, so we met them. Her husband told, I mean, the best stories in this, New York, Brooklyn accent. It was so relaxing. The girls and I both said we took the ferry back to New York City. And it was just, we bought all three of us were like, that was just so relaxing. It was just such a nice trip. And that was, in fact, the highlight of our trip. Maryann was trying to talk us into writing the cyclone. And
Yeah.
I kind of wish I'd done that, even though it's like 100 years old, I think. And there was no way I was getting on it. But I'm kind of like, oh, I kind of wish I'd done that. But anyway, that, that was the highlight of her trip. And so when she came out to Oklahoma, it was, I took her everywhere. We went to Stillwater, and Stillwater has a drive-through liquor store where I guess I've never done it, but I guess you just sit in the car and put in your order. And so and she said that was her son's favorite picture was of the liquor store. But yeah, we went to Lawton, and there's a museum in Lawton. Maryann wanted to see a tornado, and I'm like, no, Maryann, we don't want to see a tornado. And so but there's a museum in Lawton. Lawton was hit by a tornado I think it was in college in the 80s, early 80s. And so they have audio of that. And so we went into like this little cellar, area of this museum. It was decorated like a cellar. And we listened to the audio of that tornado. So that's as close as Maryann got to a tornado. And
which is the appropriate distance from a tornado.
Yes.
I still talk about it.
And so, she met my sister, and I wish she had met more of my family. I wish my mother and I had a strained relationship, and we weren't speaking at the time. I really wish Mom had met Mary. So to know that Frank was a kid, he was, a person who had married the love of his life. He was but I told Mom all that. So.
Yeah. And he was
Later.
he also didn't have a choice.
No, he didn't. And Mom was very good at welcoming, soldiers who would come to church. She would invite them over for dinner, and, she was very good at welcoming the young military men. So, yeah.
That's an area I'd like to explore a little bit more. So you've talked about, well, first of all, before I get to that, let me just ask a clarifying question. Peggy, which idea came first, to visit New York or to meet Maryann?
No, when we were writing back and forth, Maryann goes, I want you to come to New York. I mean,
okay. So this wasn't a situation where you and your daughters were going to go see the sights in New York and you thought, hey, while I'm there, maybe I could meet Maryann.
Well, it was both, because I have always wanted to go to New York, and Jordan had already been twice. And so Lauren and I were like, we want to go. And I was like, and we can see Maryann. So no, it was a connection, something I always wanted to do, but she was the catalyst. We did it because of her.
Got it.
To meet her.
Okay. So we talked a lot about what drove the two of you toward each other and why you felt compelled to meet each other and what the relationship has meant to you. But Peggy, you touched on something I would like to explore a little more, which is, what were you each hearing from other people about your plans to develop a relationship? Were they supportive? Were they apprehensive? Were they confused? I mean,
I don't think I ever gave anyone a choice. It was, this is what I'm going to do. I did not tell anybody I was researching this on the internet. After my, my discussion with Mom when I was in high school, I mean, I really didn't know how my brothers and my sister felt. I knew how I felt and what I wanted to do. And so I initiated all the research. But after I met her and talked about her, no, they seemed very receptive to meeting this person who has a connection to our lives. So.
What about you, Maryann?
Well, my two sons encouraged me highly. As soon as I said I want to go to Oklahoma, they were like, go. Yes, you should go. Yes. I was encouraged.
Right, but I'm not talking about just the trip. I'm talking about just the connection overall. I
Oh yes,
mean, do
as soon
people
as I
find it?
told people, everybody was, I was forwarding my email to my sister and Rosalie, and they were encouraging me. It was great. They all
Oh,
thought it was spectacular. Great news.
that's beautiful. So they understood right away what a
Yeah.
healing thing this could be.
Yes.
That's so good. That's so
Yes.
good.
I was
I think you're
forwarding
very
it.
lucky. I think a lot of families
Yeah.
might have been more mixed in their response.
Now I included Rosalie, and Rosalie was actually writing back to Peggy.
Is that
Yes,
right?
she did write a couple of emails to me.
And have you
Yes.
met Rosalie?
She was at the wall.
She,
She was one of, yeah, we met at the wall. So, and that was such a great experience. I knew my brother was going to go on the 50th anniversary. And I said, well, let's get Maryann to go and we could all meet together. And Maryann wanted to go on April 8th. And Dennis could get off then. And his wife's a teacher. And even though, well, I'm a teacher too, but I took off because I didn't care. It was like, I'm gonna go to the wall and meet these people. And I was, it was so cool to get to meet her sister. And we did. Rosalie was there. We met Rosalie and then a friend of Frank's. So
Yeah.
that was,
Friends
it was just
came.
really
Bob.
cool.
so you said it was the 50th anniversary of the accident, so that would have been 2019, right?
Right. Right.
Um, Peggy, what have you learned about Frank, either from Maryann or from Rosalie or just through your research, uh, that you sort of that you sort of hold on to when you're thinking about him?
I loved reading every comment on the Wall of Faces because I learned more about the accident reading his page than reading anything else, because his friends were all pilots. And so they went to flight school together. You know, just because we were older when we connected. I remember when my dad turned 33, and you're like, and then when I turned 33, I'm like, I'm the same age as my dad. I mean, it's just a weird feeling. So age, of course, sticks out to me. So when I learned about Frank and learned his age, 22, and as a high school teacher, I'm like, God, he's only been out of high school for, 3 or 4 years. It's just shocking to think that we put our youth in that position. And, he apparently loved to cook. And, my dad was a cook. So there was that connection that I like to hear about. One of his friends commented on how when he was in basic training, he could only get cottage cheese and not ricotta cheese for the lasagna. And you're like, oh, that must be tragic for an Italian person, because in Oklahoma we use cottage cheese, not ricotta cheese. So
Yeah, you're doing it wrong.
yeah, I yeah. So I, just one of those deals. Wish I could have met him. So
Maryann, I'll ask you the same question. What have you learned just through your relationship with Peggy about Ivan, and that stands out to you in some way, or that you hold on to, that's important to you?
That he was such a family person, that he had 5 children. I am amazed at such a family man that he was, that he had all these beautiful children. It's to me, it's a tragedy. I think back on it every day. I always think I have his picture, his etching in my dining room. It's just something I can't let go of. When I see all the people from Iraq and Afghanistan and I see fathers, I think of Ivan all the time. It's just something that sticks with me.
How
It's
do
a
you think,
terrible tragedy.
do you ever think about, how those two might have regarded each other, if at all? I mean, I don't know if it was the first time that Frank flew Ivan around, but, let's assume that it was. I mean, how do you imagine? Do you think it was just all business? Or do you think,
Not with my brother, no. Anybody
Not
he
with
met
my,
became a fast friend.
no, not with my dad either.
Personality.
He
No.
was very outgoing and very funny. And no, they I'm sure they had a great time chit-chatting on a flight.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we've got just a little bit of housekeeping to do at the end here. For people who lost brothers or fathers or sons or husbands who haven't talked about it, whose idea of healing is to just keep it down, what would you want them to know about the relationship you have with each other, and how important that is?
I say find a friend, find someone to speak to, find anyone that'll listen to you. I had a whole family that never mentioned my brother Frank. I had my husband's family that never mentioned my brother Frank to me. Find someone. Find someone that'll listen to you, that'll talk to you, because it's a very heavy burden to carry your whole life. I remember Memorial Days, people going to parties, and I was very upset, and I just sat there and nobody would ask me, what are you upset about? What's a big deal? It's just a barbecue. It's not a barbecue to me. I remember being in my late 20s, 30s, 40s. I remember all those years, you know? Seek out help, whether you have to pay for it or not. Pay somebody to listen to you if you have to.
You
Exactly.
feel, sorry, Maryann, sorry, one second, Peggy. Maryann, do you feel different now that you have
Yeah.
Peggy in your life? I mean,
Yes, I do. I do. I do. I feel like I have a soulmate.
oh, Peggy,
Yeah,
that's got to be a beautiful thing to hear.
it is. It is. Because we didn't talk about it either. It was so comforting to know that she would talk about it. She would talk about Frank, and and share what she knew. She even shared letters that Frank wrote to her mom, and it was comforting. It was just comforting. I always considered the summer of '69 the year of waiting, where we just sat around and waited, and that was the year I turned, that summer I turned 11. And my mom with 5 kids tried to make things normal for us. When Maryann tells the story differently, I don't know if you want her to tell it, of that summer. Like, people will always talk about the landing on the moon, how monumental that, how historic that was. We weren't watching that. Mom, either had us out playing or going and doing something or visiting a relative. We were not in front of the TV. And plus, one of the things that we did in DC that I didn't realize would upset Maryann so much is we went to the History Museum. And there they have this whole, it may have been like a whole wing of the Vietnam War. And one of the things that just stood out to me were all the TVs, how this was the most publicized war because of television, and they would read the list of the missing or the dead. No, not in our house. TV was off. And but Maryann tells the story of how she and her father were watching the moon landing. Do you want to tell that, Maryann?
Yep, we were sitting down watching the moon landing, and my father said, "They can land a man on the moon, but they can't find my son in a jungle." Yep.
And that.
Mm. So
So
I'm assuming that the time that you met at the wall in 2019 was the last time you saw each other in person. Is that a good assumption because of COVID?
Right. Because it's my turn to go to New York and I'm ready to go. But yeah, it was COVID.
That was my question actually, is like, what's the plan? What's the plan from here?
Yep. Just to come east, we'll go to a Broadway show.
I'm ready. Yes.
If you're ready to fly.
I am. We did a little babysitting last year. Okay, we did a lot of babysitting last year. so that, thinking I'm retired, I've got all this time, and I don't know where my time goes. So, but yes, we are going to make plans. Yeah, Maryann, I'm coming.
Good.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, when I asked if you felt ready to fly, I meant in terms of the pandemic. Like, some people are still nervous about crowded airports and, little crossing the country in a little tin can where you're all breathing each other's exhaust.
That's a concern, but I'm vaccinated, so
yeah,
we'll go with it.
All right. Do you have any plans to go back to the wall together or separately?
I would like to go.
Me too.
Well, I'll be there for Veterans Day this year.
Wow.
So
Very nice.
If either of you find yourselves in DC for Veterans Day, give me a heads up.
Okay.
Because I too would like to I don't know, I would just like to find that panel and stand there.
When we went to the wall, we put, how you can make an etching of the name. And we put Ivan and Frank's names on the same piece of paper.
Oh, wow.
So she must have framed it.
Ivan I. Green, 27 West, line 38. Francis D. Alavento, panel 27 West, line 35.
Thank you both, by the way. You were great. Both of you were just great. It's just so generous of you both to, I mean, this is deeply personal stuff and you're sharing it with a broad audience. So that's not lost on me. And thank you. It's a gift.